Hello everyone, my name is Michael.
And I'm Grace.
And this is Disney Through the Ages.
On this show, I'm forcing my husband to watch every animated Disney movie with me in order, starting with Snow White and continuing, through the ages.
You're not exactly forcing me. It was your idea, but I knew what I was getting into when we got married.
That's true. This has been a long time coming. So as I was saying, we're watching every animated Disney movie in order of release date, then reviewing each movie.
The idea here is to see whether these old classics hold up to modern standards, as well as seeing how Disney movies have evolved over the years. This week, we're starting with Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, which was the very first feature-length animated movie, not just from Walt Disney, but actually the first in the world. So coming into this movie, what are your thoughts and expectations?
Well, first off, my thoughts are that we're going to be interrupted a lot by our dogs because this is a coronavirus time and we're stuck inside, so just be prepared. Be prepared.
This is our fourth take of this exact moment.
Yeah, it's so much fun. Yeah. But they're cute, so it's okay. But honestly, I'm really excited to watch the movie because this is the one that started it all. Like, this is the cornerstone of Disney. And, it's the cornerstone of animated movies as entertainment as well.
Yeah, without Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, not only would we not have Moana or Frozen 2, but we also wouldn't have Shrek or Minions, which, I mean, that's arguable whether that's a good thing or not. But, yeah, so I'm looking forward to this. I'm honestly not as nostalgic about this movie or anything, so I feel like I'm probably going to be a little more critical, just because it's not a movie that I grew up with. But
I did grow up with this movie, and to be honest, it wasn't one of my favorites, but I am really looking forward to watching it with fresh eyes and seeing it for the first time in a really long time.
Yeah. Honestly, I can't remember the last time I saw this movie. The last time I heard the story of Snow White was when your sister was in the high school play, I don't know, it was probably 2015, something like that. So, yeah, so I guess without further ado, we'll go watch the movie and we'll be back to talk about it in just a moment. So I figured we'd start out with talking a little bit about our expectations going into the movie and kind of what are your thoughts as far as I know it's been a while since you've seen Snow White. So what were you thinking going into it?
Yeah, it's been a really long time. I don't even think I've watched it since. We definitely not before we've been married.
We got married in 2015. For those of you listening who did not know, so that means it's been 5 years now. At
least, because I was thinking I don't even know if I watched it. I think I've been wanting to watch it since Once Upon a Time came out, and I haven't watched it since.
When did Once Upon a Time? I got to look up now when Once Upon a Time came out.
So, because I really loved what they did with the character of Snow and Charming. So, yeah, so it's been quite some time.
Once Upon a Time is marked as a show from 2011. Yeah, the first episode aired October 23rd, 2011.
Oh.
So, yeah.
It's been a little while since I've seen it.
Yeah, that's about a decade.
But I grew up watching Disney movies, but this was just not one I watched a whole lot growing up. Yeah. She's just never one of my favorite princesses, but I have so much respect and admiration just because it's the one that started it all. Mm-hmm. I mean, everyone talks about how Mickey Mouse is the one that started it all, but really Snow White is what started Disney and Disney movies. And
yeah, because they had done some Mickey Mouse animations and Steamboat Willie and stuff before Snow White, but Snow White is where it really gained traction because it was the first feature-length animated movie. It showed the world what animation could do. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I feel very much similar to you where, I'm not as big of a Disney person as you are, but I did grow up watching a lot of Winnie the Pooh and things like that. And I have two older sisters, so we watched a lot of Little Mermaid and other princess movies. But Snow White, like you said, was never really one of them that I watched very often. I probably honestly only seen it once or twice in my life before we watched it for this review. So it's definitely one of those that's culturally, I know of the story. Obviously, everyone in the whole world knows that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and all this, but I didn't have any specifics of the movie in my head going into this. So my expectation going into this was obviously it's a well-known movie and it started it all, so it has to be good, but it's very old too. So I'm kind of thinking since I don't have the nostalgia factor of loving it since I was a child, I probably am going to be a little bit more critical about the animation and the acting and things like that.
Well, and if you're ready to go ahead and start talking about the movie after watching it, I think I realized why I didn't really like it growing up.
Oh, yeah? Why is that?
Because it is scary.
Yeah, there was, oh wow, especially I remember that scene where Snow White is running away from the huntsman and all the branches of the trees and stuff, everything looks like evil, malicious, out to get her, and like that's pretty intense for a kids movie.
Yeah, like I was watching it, like we were watching it, and I was kind of scared. Like I was like, oh my goodness, like this is intense. Yeah. Like, and how they conveyed that in the animation, I was shook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and since neither of us have seen the movie in so long, obviously we know it's a Disney movie. It's going to have a happily ever after. But in some ways, since we haven't seen it in so long, it allows you to have that suspension of disbelief of like, what's going to happen to her? She might die. We don't know. That tree might eat her face.
Yeah. And it's a really dark movie too. Like, not only that, like the huntsman was chasing after her. And, like, the wicked queen had asked him to kill her and put her heart in a box and show it to her as proof.
Yeah. Yeah, not her head or her face or anything, her heart, which is pretty gruesome, too. Like, how are you gonna recognize someone by their heart?
Well, she did it.
Yeah, exactly. That was the point. The huntsman put, like, I think it was a pig's heart. That was it in the story. So, yeah, and I noticed when we were starting out the movie, it mentioned that Snow White and the Seven Dwarves is based on Grimm's fairy tales. And so I was like, all right, this is going to be kind of dark anyway, because I didn't realize it was Grimm's fairy tale, but like they're called Grimm for a reason. And I know it's their name, but like they are kind of Grimm fairy tales too.
Well, and then, beyond that, there's the scene, like the whole scene where she's transforming, like the like queen is transforming into an old hag. Like that was really intense.
Yeah, for sure.
Like there were skulls and
magic potions and lightning. It felt like a scene out of Frankenstein or something, like a horror movie, obviously animated, and so it's not quite as scary as it would be if it was Vincent Price raising the dead or something, but like
it's still pretty intense.
Yeah, it was for sure.
And then, she's making a sleeping death spell,
Yeah.
And, it is kind of interesting. I just had this thought. They did a little setup there, it's like, are there any cures to it? Oh, the only cure is, like, true love's first kiss. Well, no one would ever love Snow White. Like,
even though she's the most beautiful in all the land.
Yeah.
Which is kind of... So, some of the plot, that brings us around to some of the plot of this movie. Left a bit to be desired by today's standards, for sure. Because, like... At the beginning of the movie, the mirror on the wall, like, why does she have this enchanted mirror? We don't know. Why is she this sorceress? We don't know. There's a lot of things that are not really addressed in this movie that I don't think a more modern movie could get away with, if that makes sense. There's some plot holes and things, and I'm sure those plot holes are filled in the original fairy tale or in other adaptations of Snow White. But just in this movie in particular, there were some... Is plot holes a good word for it? I think that...
Yeah. I don't know if plot holes necessarily, or just not as much development. Like,
yeah, that's true. Because it's not that it's inconsistent. It's just it doesn't tell you some things.
Yeah, and the whole movie really goes kind of like, it takes you kind of like on a little bit of a roller coaster where it's like very serious and then very lighthearted and then very serious and then very lighthearted and very serious.
That's very true.
So it's kind of a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like serious, then comic relief, serious, then comic relief, So there's just like, it's like, why are they like showing this? Like some of these things, it's just so random. Like the scene where they wash up before dinner.
The dwarves.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly the one I was thinking of when you said, like, some of the scenes are, why is this in here? Is like, there's this whole... I forgot that the huntsman existed until we watched this movie. And then we watched it, and I remembered why I forgot he existed. He's in it for, like, 12 seconds. Literally, I wrote down, at 9 minutes and 30 seconds into the movie, that's the end of seeing the huntsman. He's only in the first 9 minutes, and only for a very brief snippet of that.
That's actually, I don't know that that's correct, because I think he shows up a little bit later with a pig's heart.
That's right. Yeah, he did. So that's that's 9 minutes and 30 seconds in is the last interaction with the huntsman and Snow White. And then there's like a 10-second scene of him giving the queen the pig's heart instead of Snow White's heart. But like they took so little time. What I was getting at is they took so little time on the huntsman, and then all of a sudden there's a several minute long scene of the dwarves getting bathed and scrubbing up for dinner and stuff. And I think it's like you said, they kind of tossed in a lot of that stuff for kind of comic relief. And also I feel like the animation was strongest on the less realistic parts of the movie. And so like I felt like the animation on the magic mirror and the evil queen left a bit to be desired, and even on the prince and Snow White. But then like the dwarves were fantastic. And so that's probably part of it, is they put this whole big scene in where it's like we can show off how good our animation of the dwarves is. And along with that, I think the animals were the best part of the movie. They were so well animated.
They were so good. And we talked about briefly how later in Disney, like there's a cliche of the animal sidekick. You know, you're a princess if you wear a dress and you have an animal sidekick. And
yeah.
But her, like the whole forest is Snow White's animal sidekick.
Yeah.
Like she's friends with all of them. They're all helping. There's deers. There's birds. There's
chipmunks.
Yeah. Like the whole forest is her animal sidekick, and it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, that's pretty great, because she definitely didn't have just one. And even as like even with other princesses like Cinderella, she had more like the mice as her sidekicks. And then of course, you know, more modern Moana has Hey Hey in particular. Yeah, she had all of them. That's funny. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, so I don't know. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was really good.
And now that she mentioned it, during that cleaning scene where the Snow White's cleaning the dwarf's house, you don't actually see her much in that scene. It's mostly focused on the animals.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but you're right. It is more focused on the animals. And like I said, I wonder if, like, I'd love to watch the special features of Snow White sometime. We didn't do that before doing this review because we didn't want it to influence our judgment of the movie. But like, I'd love to see. I wonder if that was part of the thought process behind it. Was, you know what, we can do the people pretty well, but we can really do the animals and the character people like the dwarves way better. So let's just focus on them.
Yeah, there's something. I know we both noticed, like actually the animation of like Snow White and the Prince isn't as good, in particular their faces.
Yeah, and I think part of that, I know that's a thing with cartoons and comics in general, is that it can be really hard to have realistic looking people that also have enough of a distinguishing feature to be recognizable. Like, it's real easy to recognize Grumpy because he's got a big nose and a bright red hat and a really grumpy face. And then it's real easy to recognize Dopey because he's got those gigantic ears. And like, you know, you can, the dwarves are more like caricatures. And so they have more pronounced defining characteristics. Whereas with Cinderella we haven't got there yet. With Snow White and her prince, they are more realistic, and so there's less of that extraneous detail.
Yeah. Now, something I will notice, so that's like, I feel like we talked a little bit about negative things, but something really positive about the animation is, and that I was paying attention to, is the backgrounds. Like, the backgrounds in all the scenes are, like, really good. Like, you know what I'm talking about when you see the animated things, and you know what things the animated character is going to interact with because it looks different than everything else. But none of that is present in Snow White. Like, the backgrounds and, like, the characters, like, flow very smoothly together.
Yeah, that's really, I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. Especially, like, I wrote down specifically about the dwarves' house. I thought the backgrounds and the scenery in the dwarves' house looked fantastic. But you're right. I think part of that is how much they interacted with it. Because, you know, the dwarves are getting scared thinking that Snow White is a monster upstairs. And so they're slamming each other into cupboards and things like that. And so, like, everything that's in the background is also able to be interacted with. So, yeah, that's really true. It definitely never feels flat. It feels like a real world that you're taking a peek inside of. Yeah.
Yeah, and the things that they chose to focus on the details of the animation look really good. Like, for instance, I love how the jewels are animated to look sparkly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that is something I love, the way they animate the sparkles.
And that's something that still holds up today. I mean, you know, you go to Disney World to the Seven Dwarves train ride, and they use that exact same animation for new stuff there, because they have, like, you know, at the ride they have all the guidelines of how to buckle in your children and stuff like that, but it's told by the Seven Dwarves when you're waiting in line, and it uses the same animation style as the movie because it's still good.
Yeah. And also, like, the whole scene with the washing it before dinner, like, the bubbles, like, looks so good.
Yeah, that was really, really cool, because I know bubbles and water are, like, things that are really hard to draw and animate and make them look good. And so that's really impressive watching that scene, too. I felt like a lot of this movie felt like proto-Fantasia. Because I know Fantasia is all about these scenes that are happening, and it's all set to music, and it's like classical music, I believe, that they have animated like little mini movies to go with. And I feel like a lot of Snow White felt that way, where they were like trying to match up what was going on with the music that was happening too. So that was really interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of music, I had kind of forgotten about the number of songs in this movie, and I'd forgotten they were really good. Like, it was definitely, the music was definitely made in the 30s. You know, I will say that.
Yeah. What was the song that the prince sings at the beginning of the movie? But it's when Snow White is doing, because every princess has their "I Want" song. You know, with Ariel, it's the "I want to be part of that world," that kind of thing.
Wishing.
Yeah, that one. And see, when the prince shows up right after that, I loved his song right there. It really reminded me of Jeremy Brett singing "On the Street Where You Live" in My Fair Lady, which I love. Jeremy Brett, grew up on his Sherlock Holmes, and so that's just kind of a favorite old movie that I look back to. But yeah, that was just the song that really stuck out the most to me. But yeah, With a Smile and a Song, that one was really good too. I had a note about that, with all the animals in the forest singing with her and stuff.
Oh yeah, it was really nice. And then it kind of blew my mind listening to, you know, the Hi Ho, you know, because the first time you actually hear them singing it, it's hi ho, it's home from work we go.
Yeah, that blew my mind. Because we always sing it as "it's off to work we go," but actually the first time you hear it is "it's home from work we go," and they do say "off to work we go" later. But yeah, that was interesting. Also, in that scene, so one of the dwarves, I think it was Doc, says "Jiminy Crickets," and that made me wonder: was that a saying? Like, was Jiminy Crickets something that people would say, and then they used that for the cricket in Pinocchio, or was it already the name of the cricket in the original Pinocchio story? Or what, you know what I mean? Like, it was just kind of weird hearing a character's name in a different movie.
I will say Pinocchio's the next movie.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
So,
okay.
It's been a really, like, crazy Easter egg, if that's accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of how Pixar always has, like, a little Easter egg for their next movie. And you never can tell what it is until you've seen the next movie.
So, I don't know about that, but that's interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, the music was good.
Yeah.
It's definitely still catchy too. Like, you know, the next day I was singing that "I'm Wishing" song like all day long.
Yeah.
After we watched it.
Personally, the music is one of those things that I'm kind of conflicted on, because I think it all fit well with the movie. I think, you know, they sing a happy song at a time when they are expected to be happy, and they sing a sad song when they're supposed to be sad. Like, it all flowed well. My problem is more just with that era of music in general, because everyone sang with this crazy, insane amount of vibrato all the time. And like, I'm Wishing is one of them that really stuck out to me, where the princess sings and she sounds like, "I'm wishing," like her voice wavering so much.
Right.
And I find that personally just kind of grating to listen to. But they're good songs. I think I would like a remake better.
Yeah.
Like I would rather hear a modern singer singing those songs because the melodies and the lyrics are great. It's just the way, and like I said, it's a product of its time. A lot of movies were like that, even live action movies. They sang with a lot of vibrato, and that was how they were trained. And so I personally don't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of the movie being a part of its time, a product of its time, there definitely are some things in this that would be a bit controversial by today's standards, specifically Grumpy. Like, he is very, oh, them women and their wiles and all females are full of wicked wiles, and I don't know what they are, but I'm again it. Like that.
Well, the first thing when you said that jumped out in my mind was praying.
Yeah, that's true.
Snow White prayed during the movie. Like, and one of the things I specifically noted is that she was praying for Grumpy to like her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. And he did eventually. But yeah, it's funny because like the dwarves keep her around because she can cook. And I know a lot of feminists would have a problem with that, where like her whole worth comes from, at the beginning she's beautiful, and like with the dwarves she can cook, and that's where her worth comes from, which I don't think is really true, but I can see where people would have that kind of issue with the movie, you know?
Well, and also, well, today's chivalry is dead, but there was definitely a lot of chivalry. Like, while Grumpy was, he said those things, they were very chivalrous. They let Snow White sleep upstairs, and they all slept downstairs. Mm-hmm. They told her to be careful. They warned her when they were going to work. They're like, please do not let anyone in. Like, they really cared about her. Yeah. They really wanted her to, I don't know, be safe and stuff. So.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about this until now, because when that happened, that scene in the movie where they're like, oh, you can sleep upstairs, we'll sleep wherever, and then they just like jam themselves into cupboards and stuff. It's so ridiculous. But I didn't think about it, but that makes sense, because my first thought is, she doesn't need 7 beds. Like, she was sprawled across like 3 or 4 earlier in the movie. That means like half of them could still have their beds, but probably, like you said, it's chivalry of not wanting to be in the same room as a lady while she's sleeping because they're not married to her, like that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but that would be seen as scandalous back then.
Yeah, I feel overall like the movie is very wholesome.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's definitely a lot of scary bits, but like it's also really wholesome. Like the animals like are helping her clean, and she's not letting them just sweep the dust under the rug. She makes them like sweep it outside, and like the deer is licking the plates to clean them, and she's like, oh no.
Yeah.
That's not how it's gonna work. She makes the dwarves wash before dinner. Like, there's just a lot of very, very wholesome things.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, there definitely is a lot of wholesome stuff in the movie, and it again, I think, goes back to being a product of its time. A lot of those types of morals that were just part of the culture have shifted a bit over the years, where, like you said, chivalry is dead to some degree now, and so but although I did find it's a bit of a trope to gripe about this, but she falls in love with the prince after like 2 seconds of hearing him sing. That kind of bugs me a little bit of like, it's not true love, but I know it's a short animated movie and they have to tell a whole story, and so that was just a way to save time and stuff. They probably had a real relationship or something, but it just seems weird to me.
Well, I'm gonna argue that the potion said that the antidote is true love's first kiss, so obviously it's true love because the kiss will corrupt.
I mean, that's a pretty solid argument. I don't think I can fight that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see your point though, and it's definitely cliche and not great storytelling. Yeah. But part of my thoughts is that just goes back to kind of poor plot things that aren't really explained. We don't know if they know each other, if they've ever met. Like, he's obviously prince. She is a princess. Like, they could have met before. We just don't know.
Yeah.
And you know what? Maybe this is the first boy she's ever met, and she just falls instantly in love.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a good way to go.
There you go.
That's just an inside joke. My husband is the first one I ever dated and fell in love with. So.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, And part of that, I think, too, it just comes back to they were feeling this out. They were figuring out what formula was going to work. And they got lucky that they were close to the winning formula with this movie. You know, I mean, Snow White is still one of the highest grossing movies of all time, especially adjusted for inflation, because like 1930-something dollars are worth a lot more today. But this was the very first. It's really hard to put your brain into that context. This is the first Disney movie, but also the first animated. Wow.
The first full-length animated movie ever made.
Yeah. And so obviously they didn't know what kind of storytelling would work best. And they had to kind of figure out, okay, we got this one. This one did pretty good. Maybe we can adapt it a little bit and make the next one a little better, make the next one a little better.
Which really makes Disney unique is that they were always pushing the envelope. You know, animating these little shorts wasn't enough. They wanted to film a full-length movie, you know? And then they were constantly trying new things, you know, trying new techniques, trying new innovating ways. That's part of the reason, like, we'll see later, when Disney starts doing not as well is because they weren't being innovative anymore.
Definitely Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is definitely a solid start. Personally, it was better than I expected it to be, but it still doesn't hold up to today's standards, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Just as, like I said, from someone from the outside looking in, not a huge fan of this movie, there's a lot that could have been done better, which obviously they didn't know at the time. And it's fantastic for the time, but that's for the time. And so to me, going back and rewatching it now, it doesn't hold up as well, even though I can see what it was.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, like you said, they did the best they could, and like there aren't as many details as there are in today's movies either. You know, today's stories have a lot more detail. I will say one thing is, I always say, you know, it's a good movie if the credits are at the beginning. And
she's not just saying that for the podcast. She really does say that. Every time we watch a movie that has credits at the beginning, she's like, oh, this is going to be a great movie.
And also, I love the cliche storybook beginning and, like, the story on the screen. And they would never, ever do that in today's, like,
you had to
movies.
read, like,
you
3
had to
pages.
read, like, 3 pages.
Yeah. And part of that, like, you know, part of that can be chalked up to people are lazy today and they don't want to read 3 pages.
And so they
But
wouldn't do that.
also, I think they wouldn't do that just so that littler kids can enjoy it too. You know, like if you're not good at reading yet, then you'd have trouble getting into this movie if you didn't have a big sibling or parent there to read it to you, you know?
Yeah.
So part of it's probably a little bit of accessibility too.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, they'd rather use that time to actually, like, animate things and fill out some more detail and things like that.
Yeah.
But, like, then it really worked. And, you know, at that time, going to movies was, like, a family affair. Like, you didn't just send your kids to the movies. I mean, I know it's an animated movie, but I almost wonder if it is, like, intended more for adults.
I kind of wondered about that while we were watching it, especially in, like, the scarier parts and things like that. And part of that might be kids back then might not have been as scared by things or something. You know, I mean, kids are always kids. But I feel like people used to be a bit less sheltered in some cases, you know? So, yeah, moral of the story with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is don't help old ladies with heart conditions. That's what I heard. Because she said, oh, my heart, I'm going to fall down, or whatever it was she said. And that's when Snow White was like, oh, yeah, come on in. Oh, here, have a magic wishing apple. If it sounds too good to be true, it's too good to be true. Don't take the magic wishing apple.
Okay, so counterpoint, the actual moral of the story is always listen to animals. Because the animals tried to warn her that it was actually the queen, and that she didn't listen.
That's true. That's very true.
Also, they tried to get the dwarves' attention, and the dwarves were like, I don't know what's going on. And then one of them goes, oh, you know, hey, maybe the queen is after Snow White.
Yeah. It had a very Timmy's fallen down a well kind of vibe to it, you know? Yeah, and let me just say, those dwarves were totally going to murder the queen. They were coming after her.
Going on with the dart thing.
Yeah.
But no, instead she like falls and Let's see.
Didn't lightning strike the boulder and a boulder fell on her or something like that?
Yeah, the lightning struck, and so then she fell, and then the rock fell on her, probably. And then there were vultures. And so it's like, oh, wow. If you read into that, it's like, wow.
Yeah, that was crazy dark. I was not expecting that ending. And I know I've seen this movie at some point in my life, and I've heard the story. But, like, I didn't remember how the story ended as far as the queen goes. You know, like, it was just like, wow, she just died. Like, the dwarves were going to murder her. And then they couldn't because she died from a boulder.
I was shook.
Yeah, I was also shook.
I remember the thing with the boulder, though, because that was a very key part in the Snow White ride at Disney World that used to be there. It was actually called Snow White's Scary Adventure, and it was aptly named. Obviously, because this is actually scary.
Yeah, just a little peek behind the curtain for people listening to the podcast. As soon as we finished the movie, Grace mentioned that to me, that the Snow White ride that used to be at Disney had that in it. And then we spent the next like 30 minutes looking up YouTube videos to try to find a decent video of that ride because I hadn't been to Disney when it was open.
Spoiler, there's not a good video.
There's
and
really
if there
not.
is, please let us know.
Yeah, let us know, because all
all
we've seen were like really bad, like probably filmed on a flip. Anybody remember those from like 2003?
But as a kid, like I was super, like I loved the ride, but it was super scary because like I was always convinced that like the rock was gonna fall on me.
Oh yeah,
like because she was trying to like get the rock, and it looked like it was gonna fall on you, and I was always scared it was gonna fall on me.
Yeah.
So it was very exciting. I'm still a little sad it's gone.
Yeah.
I'm still a lot sad actually. I'm just gonna be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, the roller coaster is cool, but like, I mean, who says there can't be two Snow White rides? She's the one that started it all, okay, guys? Like, she deserves two rides. Bibbidi does.
Is the one at Disneyland the same as the one that was in Disney World?
No.
Okay. Because I was going to say, we just got to go to Disneyland then. But yeah, if it's not the same, that's a shame.
The one in Disneyland is actually closed for refurbishment right now.
Oh, is it? Oh.
Yes. There you go. Fun fact.
There you go.
If you're listening to this later, though, that may not be accurate. So. Although I guess it's really closed right now. Coronavirus.
Yeah, very true.
Anyway, any last thoughts or comments?
The last thing I have written down is a really quick note as far as, again, talking up the animation. The rain was so good. There's something about rain in video games or movies. If it's done right, like it'll make me feel kind of chilly, like I need to bundle up with a blanket. Like Minecraft, it makes me feel kind of chilly, like I need to bundle up with a blanket anytime it rains. And a lot of movies don't capture that, but this one gave me that same feeling. Like it was really good rain. But then my other last point was I thought it was really nice how the trope is, oh, I'll kiss the princess and she'll be revived. But when the prince showed up, he was kissing her goodbye, which is a really sad moment. And so like that, just that slight subtle difference of he was giving her a kiss goodbye. And it wasn't like, you know, people joke about it being like a necrophilia thing or something, you know, like that's not what Snow White was. It was just like when my grandmother passed away, I gave her a kiss on the cheek. You know, that's what he did essentially, but it was true love and it broke the curse. And that was just pretty powerful, realizing that distinction.
Yeah, and I that was going to be my last note too, is about the ending as well. You know, they put her, she was so beautiful, they couldn't bear to bury her. They put her in a glass coffin. They went there every day. They mourned her for such a long time. Like, because I believe the movie takes place in like summer or like fall. And something they had touched on is Snow White kept saying, you know, hopefully the prince will meet me in spring. And he finally finds her when it's spring. They've been mourning for her for months and months and months. And finally the prince finds her, and then it's a happy ending. Yeah. But there's actually like a long, sad period in there.
Yeah.
So that was just something I noticed, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So overall, unless you had any other thoughts, you want to go into how would you rank this movie as far as like your opinion of scale of 1 to 10, how much you enjoyed it, how good you think it is, that kind of idea.
Scale of 1 to 10.
Or do you want me to go first?
You can go first. I'm thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say personally 1 out of 10 just overall. I would give Snow White probably a 6 or a 7. Honestly.
I was personally feeling 7. Like, it's not like it was very original, and like the plot had some inconsistencies. The music was pretty good, but not great.
Yeah.
The quality as far as the animation and the acting the animation was fantastic. The acting, could be a little hit and miss, but yeah, I feel like 7. Like it's a really good movie. I watched it again. Like we bought it, we have it on our shelf. Like,
yeah, I agree mostly with that. For me, the animation was a little more hit or miss. Specifically, the mirror and the evil queen, but also a bit with Snow White herself and the prince. Like, especially with the mirror, it was very choppy. It felt like if you're playing a video game that's supposed to be running at 60 frames per second and it drops down to 5. It's like, what is even going on? And it's just like this really choppy kind of look to it. I felt like the magic mirror and the queen, to an extent, kind of looked like that. With Snow White and the prince both, I felt like there was a bit of variation in their faces, where their faces didn't always look the same from scene to scene.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing just kind of irks me a little bit. But again, overall, it definitely was a product of its time, and it was fantastic for its time. If I was, back in 1930, whatever, when this came out, I would give this movie a 10. It's fantastic. It's just we've progressed enough since then, and I don't have the nostalgia that now it's doesn't hold up quite as well.
Yeah, no, I do agree. Yeah, there are definitely some weak points in the animation. But overall, it was really good. I think part of me has rose-colored glasses as far as Magic Mirror goes, just because I have Magic Mirror and Disney Emoji Blitz, and it's just like my favorite emoji. I'm like, so like...
Sounds about right. That's fantastic.
So,
are you going to think Jiminy Cricket's the best too because he gives you a star power up?
Possibly.
Yeah. This is not an ad for Disney Emoji Blitz. It's just kind of a fun game.
I mean, unless they wanted to sponsor us, I don't think they'd want to do it after this episode.
That's fair. Yeah. Any closing statements or anything?
This is fun. This is gonna be a fun adventure. I really enjoyed rewatching it with fresh eyes. Like, I'm looking forward to rewatching them all and rewatching them in order to see the evolution of Disney movies. So, I don't know. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, me too. There are some movies in there that I just haven't even seen, and others that I've seen once when I was like 8 years old and I haven't seen since. So I'm definitely looking forward to this whole adventure.
Normally, this is the part of the show where we would read listener mail, but since this is the first episode, we don't have any listeners yet, and so of course we don't have any emails to read either.
Yep, so now we would love to hear from you. Send in your thoughts about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and we might read them on the podcast next week. Grace, how can the beautiful people get in touch with us?
You can find us on Twitter or Instagram where we're at Disney Ages, or you can send us an email at disneyagespodcast@gmail.com.
And all of those are listed in each episode's show notes, so just check the description to see that information. The music for the show was created by Kevin MacLeod and is being used under Creative Commons license, with all the links and information also down in the show notes.
That's all we have for you this week, so be sure to check back in next week to hear our review of Pinocchio.
Until next time.
See ya!